You know, I'm glad you decided to tune in. Yes, you've tuned into The Real Story, and I am Daniel Habney. And think how fortunate and blessed you must be that you have a cable access channel where you can get information that's not manipulated, that's not controlled by New York City or for some, some big network tied to some banker, or tied to what? Tied to General Electric or, Anyway, think how fortunate you are. And that's one of the great benefits of cable access. You'll notice, nobody's telling me what to say. Nobody's telling me what to think. I can bring forth any information I want, and I'll ask you once again, can you follow the money? The usual. All right, so what do I have for you? I thought it was very, very interesting. There I am. We've got a local sharing paper. When I say local, I don't know how local The Buzz is, but here we go. This is The Buzz, and I'm looking at the issue from January 21st to February 4th. So here you go. That's the cover to The Buzz. And what I thought was interesting was they had a very interesting article in the middle, and it was called Vaccine Autism Link a Fraud. I thought it was very interesting because there was this gentleman, a Dr. Wakefield, who happened to be a British doctor, and evidently well-educated British doctor. But he had come up and said, well, gee, we're noticing, let's see, how did he put it, that the, Wakefield declared was a new syndrome of the brain and bowel disease, autistic endocrinitis. Well, that's interesting. Very few people realize that you do have more receptors in your digestive tract than you do in your brain. You're like, what? That's my brain up there. But what's important is, here we go out of The Buzz, and this was written by a Susan Perry. And what Susan Perry tells us is that this guy was bad because he called into question, gee, there's something about how autism, like a hockey stick curve, has been going up, where it was like 1 in 20,000+. Now it's as low as 1 in 65. And how it's been going up, and he found that, gee, a lot of it related to, at least what his findings were, was this could be tied to some of the MMRs. Measles, mumps, rubella, remember that? Okay, so anyway, the whole thing with vaccines. I thought this was interesting, so I read that out of The Buzz, and I say to myself, that's what the people in Sharon are being fed, as data, as valid, as truth. You pick it up in the paper, it's real, as seen on TV, that kind of thing. Well, here we go. I was listening to an interview, and it happened to involve Dr. Wakefield. In this case, Alex Jones and Dr. Wakefield. So what I'm going to bring for you is basically, a very good, what I thought, very enlightening interview. And I thought it'd be good for you, the viewers, not only the Sharon viewers, but for all the viewers out there, because it's not bad to ask questions. And when you start seeing the collusion and the criminals that we have in various things of our lives, corruption's nothing new. It's just what happens. But it's up to you to fight for your family and for your, what will be your descendants. So here you have Dr. Wakefield. He was on the Alex Jones show, and I want you to, now meet the doctor, the one that they demonized in that article, the one that they said, a fraud and all this other stuff. Tell me what you think.
Now, joining us for the next 53 minutes until this live Sunday broadcast ends is Dr. Andrew Wakefield. He was just in a few weeks ago, but I asked him to come back in, because he lives here in Austin, into studio again because of such huge developments. And, of course, without going over his lengthy and prestigious bio, he's a gastroenterologist. And he has a MB, BS, FRCS, FRC path as an academic gastroenterologist. He received his medical degree from St. Mary's Hospital Medical School, part of the University of London in '81. One of the fourth generation of his family to have studied medicine at the teaching hospital. He pursued a career in the gastroenterology surgery with a particular interest in inflammatory bowel disease. He qualified as a fellow with the Royal College of Surgeons in '85, and in '96 was awarded a Wellcome Trust Traveling Fellowship. And his bio just goes on and on and on from there. Callous-disregard.com is one of the sites. VaccineSafetyFirst.com is another. He has a new best-selling book out that you've probably seen featured on Good Morning America, Anderson Cooper. I mean, the list goes on and on. But a year ago, they ran a hoax against Dr. Wakefield, similar to WMDs in Iraq, and they said he had lied about studies he did linking the one particular vaccine to autism. And then I remember reading it a year ago, and there was no proof. It was just basically no facts. And then they kind of resuscitated it in the last few months because national polls show that people completely don't trust the vaccine makers now because of all the latest fiascos. And again, they came out and said he's been discredited. But now ABC News and others have had to run the headlines that Dr. Wakefield is actually the one who deserves a apology. Dr. Wakefield demands retraction from the British Medical Journal after documents prove innocence from allegations of vaccine autism data fraud. And Dr. Wakefield, it's great to have you back in studio with us. Tell us what's really going on here.
Alex, it's great to be back. Thank you very much.
Great to have you.
As you say, a huge amount has happened since we spoke last. And just to characterize it for your listeners and your viewers, there's a story that goes around in legal circles in the UK, and it's just an instructive story about what has actually happened. And just a little anecdote, but it's about a lawyer in court who is cross-examining a witness in an assault case. And he says to the witness, "I put it to you, sir, you did not see my client assault Mr. Smith." He said, "No, I didn't." He said, "I put it to you, sir, that you did not see him bite my Mr. Smith's ear off." He said, "No, I didn't." He said, "I put it to you, you saw nothing at all." And he said, "Yes, I saw him spit it out again." Now, the point of that, Alex, is that you can go too far. You can ask one too many questions. You can get greedy. And that's exactly what's happened in this case. So in an effort to discredit me, they've gone one step too far, and they've lied. Not only has Brian Deer lied, completely misrepresented the truth, but he has sold that story. He has hijacked the British Medical Journal, a once reputable journal, to buying into his story without checking their facts and publishing it in not only the national media in the UK, but the national media all over the world, but particularly here in the United States.
And for those that don't know, in my long intro, for some that don't know about this huge international story, boiling it down, from the start to the finish, what happened, what have they claimed, what's behind it?
Well, on the one hand, we've got children who've been damaged, they were normal, they regress into autism after vaccines, they developed bowel disease. What we looked at was their gut, and we found that they had a new intestinal disease. On the other side of the equation, the allegation against me is that I falsified the records, I changed children's records, and I changed test results to manufacture a new disease and then publish on that disease in The Lancet, a disease that Brian Deer, whatever expertise he has, I have no idea, says does not exist. And the documents that we now have prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that 14 months before the paper was published, the world's leading pediatric gastroenterologist, John Walker-Smith, went to the pathologist and identified, independently of me, nothing to do with me at all.
You didn't even know about this?
No, the pathology they found in the children, quite independent of me, and he reported this at a meeting in London. So these children had a bowel disease, and I was no part of making that diagnosis.
And you separately went and did research and diagnosed the same thing. Now expanding on that, because this is such a big issue, you did this over a decade ago, and they started panicking a year ago when now dozens and dozens, I know it's close to 30 governments, institutions have duplicated and found even more horrors than you found. And so they're panicking. The vaccine maker stock is going down. It's coming out in mainstream news that there's a tenfold increase in seizures from the H1N1 shot. The British Medical Journal comes out and says there was a gross fraud last year with the H1N1. So they're panicking. So they pick someone to lynch to try to basically run a big hoax to scare everybody off.
You're absolutely right, Alex. What this is a red herring. They're focusing on me. I got blamed in an interview the other day for children dying of pertussis in California. I've never said anything about pertussis vaccine, but if we can fix it on this guy, if we can label this guy as the fraud, as the person who's responsible for all of this, we can distract the public attention from the fact that we have got a real catastrophe on our hands, and that is the fact that there are nearly 30 million children in this country with chronic immune and inflammatory disorders which you and I know when we were kids we rarely saw. So these. And
by the way, you're a gut doctor. I've interviewed brain surgeons, neurologists. They say it's in the brain, it's in other organs. You're just studying the gut. It's hitting everything. I mean, it's wreaking havoc, and there's studies just spewing out, and the system can't stand it. They've got to, choose somebody who's very prominent and, has, Jenny McCarthy, forwarding his book. They've got to pick somebody to try to crucify to scare everybody off.
And the truth is they're failing. This extravagant, elaborate, very, very expensive public relations campaign has failed, and the polls that you referred to show exactly that. The public know what's going on. It's not that I've made it up. It's not that I've created a scare. I, as a physician, responded appropriately, professionally, and morally to a scare. The parents were concerned because they knew what was happening to their children. It's going on all over the world. Saudi Arabia, 20 years ago, there were no children with autism. Now there are over 45,000 children with autism. Where have they come from? Where have these children come from?
And then the media spins it and says it's overdiagnosis. You don't go from 1 in 2,000 a decade ago to, what, 1 in 55 in boys, 1 in 96 with both sexes? Or what are the numbers, doctor?
The numbers now in the UK are about 1 in 58 children. The numbers in the US, I'm sure, are approaching that, but they're a little later in catching up. And they use...
Well, I know this. When I was a kid, I didn't see autistic children everywhere. You go to the mall, the grocery store, you're mobbed by them. I mean, it's got to be a third of the kids I look like they're, I'm sorry to say it, like a body snatcher ate their brain.
And the problem is, Alex, that these kids are the worst of the children we see. Who are the children who've got lesser degrees of cerebral damage, who've got brain damage? Who are the children whose IQs have just dropped a few points?
That's lower, and all of the learning disorders and problems.
Exactly. How many children are affected by this? Because what's emerging now is that these conditions have at their core some immune or inflammatory component. And this includes asthma, eczema, hay fever, insulin-dependent diabetes, Crohn's disease, allergic...
What about the major university studies a year and a half ago on H1N1 finding it lowered immunity by half when you took the H1N1 shot? I mean, there's so many studies coming out.
I think these are big problems. What we're discovering again from Africa, Peter Arby's work, which was just broadcast on the Discovery Channel, there are some major problems that were unpredictable and should have been anticipated, but they are damaging the immune system in some children. In some children, the immune system, for whatever reason, genetics, age, combination of other factors, cannot deal with these vaccines, particularly in combination, in the way that it was hoped.
And it's mainly targeting boys. Stay there. I want to come back and go through all of this with you and the hoax that's now been exposed conclusively. We'll cover that first. We've got Dr. Andrew Wakefield here in studio with us, and I want to get into the fact that even ABC News is having to say, okay, well, you know, it does look like that Dr. Wakefield has been right about this, but I wanted to make another statement. If we have this massive amount of brain damage going on, and it turns out that the system knew that this was going on, as the 2000 documents that came out in 2002 when Congressman Dan Burton demanded they be released, and it turned out that the CDC, director and others, it was the minutes of their meeting saying, we've got millions of brain damaged. We've got to cover this up. So this is nothing new. This is a huge cover-up, and they've got to cover this up. They've got to continue to cover it up, because if it ever comes out that they knowingly knew this was happening and didn't care, boy, you talk about problems. Katie, bar the door.
Yeah, let me, what I want to do, Alex, if I may, is just characterize for your listeners and viewers how Brian Deer perpetrated a fraud against the American people.
And for those that don't know, tell us who he is.
Brian Deer is a freelance journalist. Now, you might think from reading what he writes that he's a pathologist, that he's a gastroenterologist, a psychiatrist, and all of these things rolled into one. In fact, he's a freelance journalist who has claimed that he works for the Sunday Times. He is not on the staff of the Sunday Times. He's got into the house of one of the parents in the Lancet paper that we published using a false name. Alex, you're a journalist. Have you ever felt the need to lie to one of your guests about your name or to get someone on your show?
No, I've never lied to anybody to get them on the show. One time I was infiltrating a political secret event, and I didn't even use my wrong name. I just acted like I'd belong there.
Right, and here he is. Here's a journalist using a completely different name, which he admits was for the purpose of deceiving this mother, a mother who was grieving for an extremely badly damaged child, to get into her house and get information on her. Now, that's tragic, and that's not the way journalists behave. So this man is no ordinary journalist by any manner of means. But let me give you an example of how he created the perception of fraud and how it was, in fact, him who caused the fraud. He accused me of changing the histories of the children from the general practitioner records into the Lancet. Now, what happened is each child was referred by their family doctor with a letter saying to Professor Walker-Smith, please would you see this child with the following problems. That letter came to Professor Walker-Smith. He did not have access, nor did any of us, to the GP's original records. They remained in the GP's office. The other thing we had was access to the prospective developmental records of the children. So we took those records and the Royal Free records, and we put into the Lancet paper what we had found, faithfully, exactly in each child.